All right, the radical equations on the day 28 ditto work like this. Is going to increase in level of difficulty, so pay attention. These first ones here, you've got a radical symbol, a square root symbol, all by itself. So the other side here is just a single term. We are ready to square both sides. When you square a square symbol, a square root symbol, when you square a radical symbol, all that happens is you're left with the stuff that's inside. Now, later on, you're going to find out that this is going to require some absolute value bars, but we're not going to talk about that here. We're just going to get to that part right now. We're going to get an x squared when you square both sides. That's what it looks like. The radical symbol is gone. That x turns into x squared. And now we venture to solve this thing. So I'm going to move everything over to the right side. And then we factor and solve. X minus 6, x minus 1, x could equal 6, x could equal 1 with a twist. I put it in here in the directions. Remember to check for extraneous solutions. And what that basically means is just check to make sure that these work and you don't get something that is not true. So let's dive into this here. Let's put 6 into the original equation on this left side here. 7 times 6 is 42, and negative 6 plus 42 is 36. And if I put 6 over here for x, I get 6. True or false? Square root of 36 is 6, so 6 does equal 6. That's good. That works fine. And if we take 1 and we head back up here to the original problem, and I stick 1 in that for that x, negative 6 plus 7, because 7 times 1 is 7, is 1. I get the square root of 1, and when I put 1 on this side, I get 1. And so I end up with 1 equals 1, so they are both good. All right, so I'm going to leave you to try B over there. Let's go ahead and head down to this type. You'll notice I got a square root by itself, but now I got a binomial over here, so it's a little trickier. We're going to square both sides. So when you square a square root, you're left with the stuff inside. And when you square this guy, the biggest error here, you don't square individual terms. You literally square the side. And by square the side, I mean like we squared this side, and it canceled the radical symbol, and we're going to square this side. And that requires us to do some foiling. If you are a generic rectangle type of person, use a generic rectangle. If you know how to do x minus 4 times x minus 4, jot that down. We're looking at x squared minus 8x plus 16. And then we're going to move everything over to the left side here. So subtract that 6x, add that 29. What is that going to get us? 45. And we are ready to factor x and x. What are we looking at here? I'm going to write some combinations there. 1 and 45, 3 and 15. That's not going to get us a 14, huh? 5 and 9. There it is, 5 and 9. 5 and 9 will get us a 14 if the 5 and the 9 were both negative. So I got x equals 5 and I got x equals 9 as my possible answers. And then I check to see if those work. So I head back up to here, and if I put 5 into this side, that will turn into a 1 on the left side of the equal sign. And if I put a 5 right there, 6 times 5 is 30. 30 minus 29 is 1, and then square root of 1 is 1. So that works out fine. I'll go ahead and put a box around that. And if I put 9 over on this side, that side turns into a 5. If I put a 9 right there, 6 times 9 is 54. 54 minus 29 is 25, and the square root of 25 is 5. So that also works. Both answers are good to go. All right, so I'm going to leave you with B, but what you should do with B is move the 7 over here. I'll just give you that hint. If you move the 7 over, getting the radical symbol, the square root symbol, all by himself, it turns into exactly the same type of problem we just did there. Okay, square both sides and try that guy. Okay, now on the last one here, we've got a couple of set of radicals, which makes this guy even harder than the previous two. So right now, I'm going to square both sides. When I square both sides, this radical symbol will disappear, and you're just left with the stuff inside. So I just squared that side, but now we have to square this side. Now, believe it or not, this is a binomial. Just like x minus 4 squared was a binomial, this is a binomial. And I'll show you what's about to happen. We are going to multiply the 4x plus 1 minus 1 times itself. 4x plus 1 minus 1. And you could actually make a generic rectangle with that if you wanted to. But back in the 80s, we did FOIL, and FOIL worked like this. First terms, I multiply the first terms, and I get what's inside the square root, because anything times itself on a radical symbol is just the stuff that's in the inside. On the outside here, -1 times that square root would be negative square root of 4x plus 1. Then I'd have another negative square root of 4x plus 1. And lastly, I'd have a plus 1 when I multiplied -1 times -1. Those are the same values you'd get in your generic rectangle if you used a generic rectangle. Now, these guys can be combined. In fact, I'll combine a lot of the stuff here. So 4x plus 2, if I combine those ones, and there's a couple of these. So minus 2 radical 4x plus 1. Okay, so I'm going to try to work to getting the radical by himself here. So I'm going to copy this portion and move the 4x over here. So that's subtract 4x from both sides. Move this 2 over, subtract 2 from both sides. And you get to here. Now, sometimes this division that has to happen next, this -2, isn't pretty. When it isn't pretty, you may want to square both sides. In fact, I'm going to square this because on your test review, I can move this -2, or I could square both sides right now. And I'm going to square both sides right now just so we can talk about it. When you square this guy right here, it's no different than if I asked you to square -2x, even though this guy's really ugly. If I asked you to square it, timesing it by itself, -2 times -2 gives you 4, so that's going to get you 4. And x times x would give you x squared. Well, that's this guy. What's this guy times himself? Well, this guy times himself is just the stuff on the inside again, right? 4x plus 1. So I just squared this side. That's what just happened. And I squared that guy and I squared that guy, and that works fine that way, just because there's no pluses or minuses. When you square this side, I've got that plus right there. So I can't just square the individual terms. That's bad. I've got to actually put that in a generic rectangle or FOIL it or whatever you've been taught. Okay, so if I multiplied that times itself, I'd have 4x squared in the front. I'd have a minus 4x and a minus 4x, which is a minus 8x in the middle, and then a positive 4 at the end. All right, so distributing here, 16x plus 4. Now, bring everything over to the right side. We got a 4x squared. We're going to subtract 16x, and we're going to subtract 4, which gives us a 0 right there. Pulling out a 4x from both of these terms is the factoring we should do. That's going to leave an x minus 6. So the two possible answers we get here are a 0 because we pulled out that x, and a 6. So let's head up to our original problem and see if those work. I'm going to start with the 0. If I put 0 right here, 4 times 0 is 0. 0 plus 1 is 1. The square root of 1 is 1. 1 minus 1 is 0. So that left side turned into a 0. And now I'm going to put a 0 over here. 2 times 0 is 0. 0 plus 4 is 4. The square root of 4 is 2. I got 0 equals 2. That didn't work. 0, not good. Let's try 6. 4 times 6 is 24. 24 plus 1 is 25. The square root of 25 is 5. 5 minus 1 is 4. 6 over here. 2 times 6 is 12. 12 plus 4 is 16. The square root of 16, also 4. All right, so 6 worked. 4 equals 4. So only 6. Okay, so you're going to try B, even though that was yucky and you didn't like it. But I would suggest this first. Take this square root and move it to the other side. When you move it to the other side, you're going to end up with, and I'm going to write it in the front here so it matches the problem that we just did, and you'll feel better. Put the -1 at the end. So I added it to both sides, putting it on the right side of the equal sign, and now square both sides and go slow. Take your time, and that's